So I said hi to some of them.
Your mic's on.
That's
Pursuant to Section 84-1411 of the Nebraska statutes, notice this meeting was given July 12, 2024. The meeting will convene at 6 p.m. and visitors may obtain a request to be heard form from staff for any presentation they may have for the meeting. In accordance with policy, the request to be heard forms must be submitted to the secretary within the first 5 minutes of the board meeting in order to be heard at this meeting. Agenda items are subject to reordering at the discretion of the board president. Please attend the entire meeting to ensure you're able to hear any discussion. Pursuant to Section 84-1411 of the Nebraska statutes, the next regular meeting of the Board of Education of Douglas County School District 0001 and the Board of Education Service Unit Number 19 will be held Monday, August 5th, 2024 at 6 p.m. in the Teaching and Learning Center at the Teacher Administrative Center, 3215 Cumming Street. Please visit our website, www.ops.org. The agenda will be kept current and available for public inspection at the Office of the Secretary of the Board of Education at the Administrative Building during regular working hours. Pursuant to Section 84-1412 of the Nebraska statutes, the public is hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is posted in the Teaching and Learning Center on the north wall. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Please be seated. Vice President Smith, can you please lead us in the vision and mission?
Yes. The vision, every student, every day prepared for success, and the mission, to prepare all students for success in college, career, and life.
Dr. McFarland, roll call, please.
Cassidy.
Here.
Erdenberger.
Present.
Full. Head.
Present.
Holman. Juarez.
Here.
Kratky.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Thielen.
Here.
7 present.
Thank you. Do we have any motions to excuse absences? And for the record, Dr. Holman let me know she would not be in attendance, and I just received a text from Ms. Full that she would be absent as well. Do we have any motions?
I move that we excuse both of Dr. Holman and Ms. Full.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Smith. And I would move to divide the question. Do we need a second to divide a question? Nope. All right. So the question is divided. We'll vote on them individually. Dr. Holman first. Any comments on excusing Dr. Holman's absence? Seeing none, Dr. McFarland, please call the roll.
Sorry. Erdenberger.
Aye.
Head.
Aye.
Juarez.
Aye.
Kratky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Thielen.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
7 aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Now to Ms. Full's absence. Do we have any comments? All right. I asked to divide the question. Specifically, this will be Ms. Full's 7th absence this calendar year out of 12 meetings. Personally, I believe that's a little bit excessive. We would like to see board members be more engaged, active, and participate in the process. So I will be voting no. Any other comments, questions? All right. Yeah, Ms. Erdenberger.
I talked to Ms. Full right before the meeting, and she is ill. It is what she's told me is that she is ill. So I will be voting to excuse her absence.
All right. Fair enough. This is the 7th time she said she is ill, so she can attend the next one. Dr. McFarland, please call the roll.
Juarez.
Aye.
Kratky. Smith.
No.
Thielen.
Aye.
Cassidy.
No.
Erdenberger.
Aye.
Head.
No.
4 aye.
All right, the motion ties, so it does not pass.
Actually, it's 3 nay.
I apologize, the motion does carry. Moving on to board and superintendent communications, as there's no school spotlight tonight, treasurer's report, Mr. Ryan.
President Head, Vice President Smith, members of the board, and Superintendent Ray, the monthly financial reports for May 31st, 2024 have been prepared and presented for your review. Thank you.
Thank you. Interim Superintendent, Mr. Ray, you have no comments, I believe. Moving on, board comments. Have any board members with comments tonight? Ms. Juarez.
Thank you, President Head. I just wanted to mention an event that I found out to bring to Mr. Ray's attention, because I don't know what our school calendar is. I didn't look up on this date what's going on, but there's going to be a Nebraska Latino Youth Summit, and I found this out when I visited with the Nebraska Commission on Latino Americans. And it's going to be a youth summit taking place at the La Vista Conference Center on October 31st. It's going to be a transformative event, a crucial step for all Latino students, as it'll help them build networking skills, as well as providing an opportunity for scholarships. The summit will be free to all junior and senior high school students across the state. So that's at the La Vista Conference Center on 12520 West Port Parkway. And I just wanted to provide that information for our school system. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Ms. Kratke and then Ms. Erdberger.
I wanted to acknowledge our summer musical. It was at Burke High and it was Shrek, and they did an outstanding job. It was almost a full house. First night I was there and they still had 2 more performances. So that was our summer musical, and they are always excellent. You can't even imagine that they are high school people and that they are in the district and all of that. It's like going to the Orpheum and seeing a production because it's always so good. So I wanted to thank them for doing that.
Thank you. Ms. Erdberger.
Thank you, President Head. I just wanted to draw your attention to something that's happening at Benson High School. Item H3 in the consent agenda covers a contract with Project Harmony to provide mental health and counseling services for students and their families at no charge to the district. It will be in, as I understand it, in the new facility that is being built on the north side of Benson High School to also supplement the health academy that they have at Benson. I also wanted to give a shout out to everybody who, myself included, who made it through the Pride Parade on Saturday morning. Thank you very much to Ms. Utterback for her leadership and cheerleading for that excruciatingly long and hot experience, but thank you very much for that. I usually try to be better prepared for this, but I'm going to have to punt a little bit. Last week I attended a celebration with the young people who served as interns for OPS this past summer. Basically, high school students who were paras, and I'm trying to remember now how many we totally had. Does anybody? Hundreds, more than 100 young people who from I think there were like 11 different high schools represented, or more, maybe even 15, and parochial and metro area. So it was just it was a fun experience to talk to so many young people that were really enthusiastic about their summer spent working with elementary students. And I think we may have encouraged 1 or 2 of them to continue to think about teaching as a profession. So thank you for everyone that put that celebration on, but more importantly, that implemented that program, because it appears to have been very successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? All right, seeing none, next on the agenda we have public comment, and we have 2 speakers who have submitted a request to be heard forums. The board has adopted policy 8346, which provides public comment for a period of 1 hour. That same policy limits individual speakers to a maximum of 5 minutes. We ask that you respect that time limit. Dr. McFarland will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you're in need of an interpreter, please let Dr. McFarland know, and one will be provided for you. We understand that people have strong feelings about the issues they come to speak about, and we ask that you respect the opinions of all who speak and refrain from applause or outbursts during presentations. If the subject of your public comment is related to a particular student or staff member, we ask that you not identify the student or staff member and instead provide that information to Dr. McFarland. She will assist us in looking into those types of specifics for you. If you do not get an opportunity to speak and would like to submit any written commentary, please provide it to Dr. McFarland. She will make sure each member of the board gets a copy. As a reminder, Nebraska Revised Statute 84-1412 requires that any member of the public desiring to address the board identify yourself, including an address, the name of any organization you may represent, unless these requirement is waived for security reasons. We don't have a request for a waiver this evening. So again, we ask that all individuals please state and spell your first and last name, state your current address, let us know if you are representing any particular organizations before you begin your comment. In addition, we ask that you remain seated until called to the podium. Please remain at the podium and do not address the board table. If you have any materials, please let Dr. McFarland know and she will get them from you. It is now 6:12 p.m. and our first speaker is Michaela Kaiser.
Good evening. My name is Michaela Kaiser, Michaela Kazor, and my address is 11619 Grand Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska 68164. Good evening, Superintendent Ray, President Head, and members of the board. First and foremost, I thank each of you for your countless hours to help the next generation succeed. In light of the events of January 13th, I would like each member of the board to know that when I come here to speak each time, I'm no way targeting any of you. Violence is never the answer, and I firmly believe that this is time for our nation to unite in a way that we have previously come together, such as after the assassination attempts of Ronald Reagan and the horrific events of September 11th. It is not the time to have political violence or division, but to have peace in our nation. I extend the prayers to the families of Donald Trump and to the families who lost loved ones on Saturday. With this being said, I come here today to speak on the library books that are currently in Omaha Public School libraries that contain explicit and pornographic content. I urge every member on this board to view what I am saying not as a political speech, but as a concerned citizen for the children in your school district. Parents, if you have minors with you, I advise that you have your children step into another room due to the graphic nature of the content I will read. Again, parents, if you have minors with you, I advise that you have your children step into another room due to the graphic content of the content I will read. The book I'm reading today is called Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. I'm extremely uncomfortable reading this book as a 19-year-old college student, but I'm reading this only to make the members of the board and the public aware of the content that is available to minors at multiple high schools at Omaha Public Schools. The book begins on page 39. The women on these book covers seem to have a lot of trouble keeping their clothes on. The men loomed behind them or clutched them in muscular arms, bending the woman's body backwards so that the breasts are pointed up. There was something disturbing about the illustrations, and it wasn't the leering men. It was the women's pliant bodies and their bare legs and lush breasts, mouths like shiny red candies. And this is referring to pornography, which is available to minors in this school. On page 286, it says, she brushed her nose against Cass' neck, and she wanted to bottle up the fragrance of her. She felt Cass' pulse beneath her lips, and Cass' hand cupping the back of her head, and at last Cass' mouth touching hers. It was still a shock to feel the connection between their bodies, as if it was risen from the marrow of her bones, thick and charged and sweet. Before she had been afraid of being discovered and afraid of discovering herself, but the more they kissed, the less she felt afraid, until her fear was subsumed beneath much more powerful feelings. She wanted to touch Cass' skin. She tugged the hem of Cass' blouse out from her skirt and slid her hands beneath it. And finally, she felt the warm skin of her back, the quiver of Cass' body as she touched her. Cass drew back briefly and reached the buttons of Lily's blouse, saying, "Can I?" Lily helped her unbutton it, and then Cass put her hands on the bare skin of Lily's waist, and Lily closed her eyes. Cass' hand slid up under her ribs and cupped the curve of her breast, and her thumb trailed electrically over the outline of Lily's nipple through her bra. And then she pushed her leg between Lily's thigh, and Lily gasped at how it felt, the pressure and the movement there. And it was exactly what she wanted. She was astonished by the way they worked between them so instinctively, as if they had been made to do this together. But Lily felt as if there was no time. She couldn't entirely forget that only had an hour together. I desire that someone more was rising inside of her as Kath moved against her, their skirts riding up as their bodies rubbed together. It felt urgent, as if it was counting down the seconds till a bomb would explode. There was no time. They had to do this right now, and she reached for the hem of her skirt and tugged it up to her hips. And she took Kath's hand and moved it to the cleft of her body. Kath hesitated. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Please," Lily said, overcome. So Kath put her hand between Lily's leg, and Lily helped her, fumbling with her underwear. It was awkward, but when Kath's fingers touched her, they both gasped. "Am I in the right place?" Kath asked. "Yes," Lily whispered. It all felt right, like the right place. Kath's fingers rubbed and rubbed, and it was so marvelous, so intoxicating. She's never touched herself like this before. And now she was pinned against the side of a filing cabinet, and it made a dull metallic thud as her hand slapped against it.
Time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Angela Gleason.
Hi, my name is Angela Gleason, ANGELAGLEASON. I live at 6612 North 105th Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68122. I am a member of the Special Education Advisory Council for the state of Nebraska, SEAC, and a board member for a couple of nonprofit organizations that advocate for individuals with disabilities and their families, the ARC of Nebraska, and the Autism Society of Nebraska. I am not here representing any of these organizations, but simply representing myself and our experience as a family in Omaha Public Schools. I am the parent of a child with disabilities who is in middle school at OPS. I want to begin by acknowledging that I know OPS has a lot of challenges, that we are the largest and likely the most diverse school district in Nebraska, and that we serve students with some of the highest needs in the state. I know this isn't an easy task, and I want to acknowledge as well that we have had many wonderful teachers and therapists during my son's time in OPS. There are staff that do good work within the district and try to truly help students succeed. I'm here to talk about problems we experienced in the Next Level Learning Summer School Program, which I believe is funded with the ESSER monies and is intended to serve children facing delays from the pandemic or other educational problems to set them up for success for the next school year. It is my understanding that children like my son or children with IEPs that receive special education services gain entry to the Next Level Learning Program by being awarded compensatory education minutes. Individual education plans, IEPs, are supposed to provide supports and services to address the student's disabilities, and compensatory education is something that is sometimes awarded if a school has violated an IEP. It is distressing to hear about the budget surplus the district has had from ESSER funds and then have the experience we had this summer. My son attended a different middle school than the one he normally attends because the district didn't have a teacher for his special ed alternative curriculum class, ACP, at his usual school. So he chose one of the two schools that had the availability. It ended up being near my workplace, so I would drive him there in the mornings and then have him take the bus home, except for on the days that he would have extra therapies outside of school. The first day I drove him, I was surprised to not meet his teacher. A para told me she was late. I picked him up that same afternoon for therapy and was told she had left early. We had arranged with the district to have private therapists attend daily with my son to work on some goals for social skills and other things. I was informed Wednesday of the first week that there was no classroom teacher, that she had attended for a short while the first day and then left, and the paraprofessionals had made their own schedule and were showing YouTube videos during the time our therapists were there. I then asked our special education supervisor from his usual school, I'm sorry, I lost my space, about it, who said she would go observe the class the next day. The teacher was in attendance that day, and from everyone I talked to, they said that she had had family issues and had to miss the beginning of summer school. The special education supervisor said she could not speak to what had gone on earlier in the week, but the teacher was there that Thursday working with students. I approached the summer school principal about this, who was entirely unconcerned and told me there were 3 to 4 adults in that room, indicating the paraprofessionals. I did not expect the summer to be a babysitting experience for my child with high needs, but that was what it was. The teacher was there for the rest of the summer, from what I know. My son occasionally brought home work that seemed to be busy work. It was coloring, counting to 20, not even really doing math. My son is going to 7th grade this year, and these are packets of something similar he would have completed in elementary school. My son is years behind his peers in capabilities, but he can do addition and subtraction with multiple digits. I got the sense from what was being sent home that his IEP was never read or looked at for what educational goals he was working on.
1 minute.
Thank you. So I'm going to summarize because I have written way too much. But so in the second week of summer school, I asked school personnel for contact information for a speech pathologist because that's why my son had gotten compensatory education minutes, was that he needs some extra speech therapy time. It took a while for them to get back to me, but they provided me with a remote speech therapist information. I contacted her and she said she had never worked with my son and wasn't working during the summer. I was contacted
30 seconds.
Thank you. By another coordinator, another special education coordinator, and they gave me the contact information of a different speech therapist who they said would be working with my son. By this time, it was the second to the last week of summer school. The speech therapist came to the school approximately 3 to 4 days and worked with him for about an hour each day. He was not able to complete all of the compensatory education minutes and has to make up more this year or next summer.
Time.
Thank you. Before moving to the consent agenda, I'll correct the record real quick. It turns out I was correct the first time. Ms. Foles' absence approval did fail. State statute requires it to receive the majority of votes of members of the board, not those present. So she did not receive 5 votes. The record will reflect that her absence was not approved. At this time, we're going to move to consent agenda. Any board member may request an item be removed from the consent agenda and consider it voted on separately. Do we have any requests? All right, seeing none, are there any, or actually, let's go ahead and take a motion to approve first. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda that's before us?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Cassidy. Now, do we have any abstentions? Ms. Cassidy?
Now we do, yes. I need to abstain from item H11, which is claim C for my role on the Omaha Public Schools Foundation Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further abstentions? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. As a reminder, colleagues, we'll be voting on the consent agenda with the with Ms. Cassidy's abstention to item H11. Dr. McFarland, please call the roll.
Thielen.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Erdenberger.
Aye.
Head.
Aye.
Juarez.
Aye.
Kratky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
7 aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving to information items. Item I-1A, the Omaha Public Schools 2022-23 graduation and dropout report. Speakers will be Ms. Susan Christofferson and Ms. Suzanne Kramer, but first I will turn it over to Mr. Matt Ray for comments.
Thank you, and thank you principals in the room for attending today's meeting. As a school district, we focused even more intently on data and school improvement this year. We walked through testing schedules and how we used the results at a board workshop this fall, to the point where you all had an opportunity to take a sample test. Teams reviewed the learning framework and the Elliott, which measures student engagement in our classrooms. Staff presented academic data at board meetings, reading, math, science, and English proficiency. Tonight, we look at graduation rates and behavior data from the 2022-2023 school year. It's all connected. We use the big picture, each data set combined, to see how students and families join our school district, learn in our classrooms, and confront challenges to achieve success. We focus on particular areas like individual reports to measure what is working and where we need to improve. Teams across our district use the data, research, and evidence to build a plan. Our students earned 22,000 college credits last year. 22,000 college credits last year. while still in high school. Graduating seniors earned $60 million in scholarships, $60 million. Because of what we offer, some students start college as sophomores. They earned their freshman year credits in our schools. But we understand that's not everyone's experience. Too many young people are not getting to graduation and beyond. We have to look closely at behavioral concerns and initiatives. Everyone, staff, students, and our families deserve safe, welcoming, and supportive schools. Everyone deserves high expectations for achievement and success. We'll talk tonight about where we need to go and paths to get there. Our employees arrive each day because we care, thousands of us. We are proud to serve. We have the need and the opportunity to make sure each student is connected and supported for success. We have the need and the opportunity to maintain our high expectations throughout the Omaha Public Schools. We have to do better. And with that, I'll turn over to Suzanne Kramer.
Good evening, Vice President Smith, President Head, Superintendent Ray, members of the Board of Education. Tonight, you've received a report detailing the calculations and analysis of our 2022-2023 graduation and dropout data. This presentation will focus on overviewing those results and how we're going to work together to improve. You've seen this slide before. It details our journey and the evolution of our past practices toward alignment. In the left-hand column, you see represented where we've been in terms of continuous improvement and accreditation in the Omaha Public Schools. On the right are the steps that we're taking to get better at getting better. We'll focus on improvement goals and align monitoring. One of our strategic plan goals is improving the on-track rate, which is an early warning metric that is predictive of on-time graduation and dropout prevention. This goal, on the left, the 5% improvement of high school students being on track, was part of our 2020 strategic plan. And though there were many ways to pull much of this data from Infinite Campus in the past in order to understand a student's credits and grades, our district did not have an efficient or common way of looking at this measurement. In fact, we had 3 definitions working in the district, one based on peer credits, the Chicago Consortium, and our own academic planner and grad requirements. Last year, a team of leaders from counseling, principal supervision, research, curriculum, and schools undertook the important process of defining this on-track metric and developing a user-centered, just-in-time metric for this all-important goal. The team began with 3 questions. How will we define on-track? Do we have the right data source? How will we design a tool that meets the following requirements? That the metric has correlation to graduation, should not be misleading, and is supportive of schools and teams taking action. Ultimately, we were able to develop and communicate a definition using our graduation requirements and build a report, then a dashboard with this data. Schools have been testing this since the early spring and sharing feedback for improvement. Early warning systems are a non-negotiable component of graduation rate improvement and school improvement in general. At the board workshop in June, we shared our focus on these key measurements and their intersections. Questions like, how many of the chronically absent students have been suspended? How many of those students are on grade level? Can we see students by EL language level? Who are these students? In order to answer these questions, getting to the root causes of an underperformance required time and significant work and ability in Excel for our schools. How could we make it easier to do the right next thing? How can we see key metrics around our students? Just in time is so important. If we know early or in real time, we can intervene more quickly. We are laser focused on attendance, behavior, engagement, and on track to support on-time graduation in the Omaha Public Schools. This slide you're familiar with at the workshop. We shared our prototype of the School Improvement 360-degree dashboard that's going to show all of the data surrounding our students and make it easier to answer those questions for our teams in our high schools and in K-12. Now, we'll dive into last year's graduation rate and dropout data. Remember, graduation is a lagging indicator. Our efforts have to be focused on prevention and early intervention, which are now part of our continuous improvement process district-wide. This slide shows key data points for which we'll provide a deeper look as we go into tonight's presentation. 2,707 students obtained a regular diploma in 4 or fewer years, resulting in a district-wide graduation rate of 70.4%, a decrease of less than 1% last year. 29.6% of students did not complete their coursework on time to graduate in 4 years. The 4-year cohort graduation rate decreased 6.3% over the last 5 years, dropping from 76.7 in 2019 to 70.4 in 2023. Graduation rate increases include Benson High and Burke High, while the other 5 high schools experienced a decrease or no change. Black or African American and white students experienced small increases in graduation rates from 2022 to 2023, but gaps remain. Exited EL students graduated at a higher rate than non-ELs and students who never participated in the EL programming in OPS. Over the last 5 years, the 4-year cohort rate has decreased by 6.3% from 76 to 70.4. The 5-year cohort rate also decreased to 74.9, the lowest 5-year rate over the last 4 cohorts, but represents 132 additional individual students graduating in the class of 2022. The 6-year rate increased by 1% for the 2021 cohort and represents another 202 students who graduated to form the class of 2021 in 5 or 6 years. We know that a student's free or reduced lunch or economic status plays a role in the likelihood that a student will graduate. Over the last 5 years, students not eligible for free and reduced lunch have consistently higher graduation rates compared to those who are eligible for those benefits. The gap in graduation rates has widened over that time to a difference of 17% in 2023. Just as a reminder, OPS does now participate in the Community Eligibility or CEP provision, which eliminates the need for free or reduced lunch forms. Therefore, NDE's free and reduced lunch eligibility metric is used through direct certification, which leads to a higher level of poverty rate reporting for 2023. Female students have consistently higher graduation rates compared to male students over the last 5 years. The graduation rate for females was 75.5% in 2023 compared to 65% for male students. This is a gap of about 10%, the smallest gap over the last 5 years. Our data continues to highlight disparities in graduation rates among different racial and ethnic groups as well. 4-year cohort graduation rates are highest for Asian and white students and lowest for American Indian or Alaska Native or other Pacific Islander and Hispanic students. Asian students recorded a 12.1 increase in graduation rates from 2019 to 2022 until experiencing a decrease of 4.3% in 2023. Black or African American students have experienced small increases over the last 3 years, growing from 70% in 2021 to 71.7 in 2023. Percentages for American Indian and Pacific Islander students have been combined due to the relatively small number of students in each group, leading to volatility in that metric that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. Over the last 5 years, students that have exited the English Language Learner Program prior to high school or in high school have consistently higher graduation rates than students who were never ELs or who are in the EL program. The average graduation rate of exited EL over the last 5 years was about 84.6%, the highest of any student group analyzed. Notably, graduation rates for ELs rose to 45.3% in 2021, but dropped over the last 2 years. English learner students that remain ELs in high school often face a longer journey to graduation as they develop proficiency in English before fully engaging in the standard curriculum with the required graduation coursework. For example, some ELs must take sheltered courses before they take English 1-2 to get English credits like most 9th grade students. Further, some ELs may enter the district as an older student in 9th grade or even later after coming to the United States from another country. Consequently, these challenges can extend the time required for ELs to fulfill all graduation requirements compared to their native English-speaking peers or those who gain proficiency in English through the district's English as a Second Language curriculum. However, all EL students in the district have an opportunity to graduate in 4 years by following their individual graduation plans that may include both summer learning and additional credit accrual opportunities. EL students make up an increasing proportion of the graduating cohorts over the last 5 years. About 10.6% of our cohort was an EL in 2019, compared to 14.1% of our cohort in 2023. In 2023, about 44% of ELs in the 4-year cohort had entered the United States within 4 years or less of their expected graduation rate. Students with an IEP in the Omaha Public Schools consistently have higher graduation rates than their peers with an IEP. The gap between the two groups remains substantial throughout the last 5 years, from 2019 to 2023, with an average gap of 21.5%. The special education needs that students require can vary from enrollment in a separate school to intermittent speech services within a regular high school. Like students who are learning English, the need for special education services can extend the time required for students to fulfill all of the graduation requirements. This graph shows the last 5-year rate for our dropout rate in the Omaha Public Schools. This rate, as calculated by the Nebraska Department of Education, has increased slightly over the last 5 years to 3.19%, but decreased by 1.2% from 2022 to 2023. We know that students drop out for a variety of reasons, such as work, family mobility, and age. Schools and student community services document their numerous attempts to reach families that are withdrawn and document that in Infinite Campus. The dropout rate for Hispanic students remains considerably higher than other groups and has increased since the pandemic. Black, white, and Asian student groups had a decrease in the dropout rate in 2022-2023. Percentages for American Indian and Pacific Islander students have been combined, again due to the relatively small number of students in each of those groups. Over the last 5 years, the dropout rate for students eligible for free and reduced lunch increased from 12.2% to 19.5%. Students who were not eligible have a relatively stable dropout rate over that time, increasing from 7.2 to 8.8%, with a noticeable spike to 10.5 in 2022. Generally, male students experience higher dropout rate compared to their female peers. The rates for females were 12.3% in 2023 compared to 17.8% for male students, a gap of about 5.5%. Just mentioning this exited EL key data point again, students that have exited the EL program prior to high school or in high school have consistently lower dropout rates than students who were never ELs or who are currently enrolled in the EL program. The average dropout rate of exited ELs over the last 5 years was about 5.6%, the lowest of any student group analyzed. Notably, the population of EL students who have dropped out included students who aged out of school, a group that is almost non-existent in the exited EL, and students that were never ELs in the dropout population. Students with an IEP generally have higher dropout rates than their peers. Without an IEP, however, the gap between the two groups is minimal over the last 5 years, with an average gap of 2.7%. Both groups experienced their largest dropout rate over the last 5 years in 2023. Students with an IEP drop out at a higher rate. While the gap decreased, it widened again in 2023. So what are we doing about this? At our last workshop, we shared with you our work around the on-track early warning metric and the 360-degree dashboard with school improvement data. This quote on the top of this slide, "Graduation is everybody's language," comes from one of our principals. We're really proud of the work that our schools have done in the last year around leveraging this metric for early intervention and prevention. The data shows that we have work to do, and we're doing it. Schools have long been compiling this data and triaging the off-track students. Having the right metric and the right tool just in time makes it easier for schools to support students through targeted and consistent interventions. Here, on this slide, we're lifting up what's working. Schools are using on-track data to develop early and individualized plan for every student who's off track. Counselors, administrators, and teachers are having one-on-one meetings with juniors and seniors based on this data. Teams of teachers are using on-track data to develop action steps for groups of students and offer recovery opportunities. And schools are leveraging the relationships that adults have with students to name and claim them, to get in missing assignments, to attend recovery and finish strong. On the right is an example of the quarterly school improvement report card that Brian High is using to offer a snapshot for staff. This pulls together attendance, behavior, and engagement as measured by the Elliott and on track. Collective ownership and frequent use of these combined metrics alongside the classroom visits that Susan will discuss again here in a moment will support students staying on track and getting back on track. We hope that the 360-degree school improvement dashboard will also help students and teams by making it easier to know what the right next step is. Graduation is everybody's language. From nutrition services to custodial staff to teachers and bilingual liaisons, all of our students, and our high schools are committed to growing this culture in every one of their buildings.
Good evening. So our ongoing approach of the things that we are working towards. The Omaha Public Schools use evidence-based approaches recommended by the Institute of Education Services What Works Clearinghouse to improve graduation rates and prevent dropout. We know that teachers are the most important improvers. A common understanding of student engagement using the Elliott alongside strong instruction with our curriculum materials is a part of our school improvement plans. As mentioned before, early warning using on-track data in just-in-time supports the right interventions for students. We offer credit recovery, next-level learning, tutoring, and multiple alternative pathways to support students who may get off track. Our academies and pathways, including the freshman seminar course, connect students to life after high school and support an increased sense of belonging. All secondary students participate in advisory, where they build relationships with one another and a caring adult and build skills aligned to the portrait of a graduate. Our high schools have sent teams to the University of Chicago to learn from experts and other districts. And lastly, our school counselors and social workers provide access and referrals to resources. We continue to build partnerships with families and our community partners to support attendance and engagement. We know it takes all of us. Earlier this year, we shared the learning framework with you. This resource supports teachers and teams in building a learning culture and experiences that will support our portrait of a graduate and meet the goals of our strategic plan. As school teams are implementing their school improvement plan, they need to regularly look at student data alongside evidence from classroom and artifacts for this implementation. This graphic details the way effective instructional leaders can leverage individual school and district tools to support their improvement efforts. We know that teachers are the most important improvers, and the first way to keep students on track is to prevent failure through engaging grade-level instruction using high-quality curriculum and maintaining high expectations. We recognize the current state and that we have work to do. We are laser focused on using just-in-time metrics to improve graduation rates. We are committed to this continuous improvement, and we believe that teachers are our most important improvers. And we also are building collective responsibility, aligning pre-K through 12 to post-secondary readiness. It doesn't just start in 9th grade. The importance of us understanding how everything we're doing from the time a student is engaging with us all the way through is essential. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, colleagues? Mr. Smith?
Could you go back to slide 21? What's problem of practice?
Thanks for that question. I appreciate it. So we, last year, a team of folks attended the Harvard Summit on Instructional Rounds. And instructional rounds is a way for groups of teachers and leaders to look at their practice, their classroom instructional practice together, and learn from one another and determine the right next improvement steps right at the level of the student. And so a problem of practice is something that a team of teachers and leaders come up with together to determine that they want to inquire about, learn more about, go into one another's classroom, and collect evidence around that problem of practice and determine what would be the next steps or next level of work relative to that problem of practice. So that's something that we're working on with a few key schools this year and looking to expand that thinking to the rest of the district across the next couple of years.
Any further questions, colleagues? Ms. Erdenberger?
Thank you, President Head. Actually, on slide 21, it was my last question, but we'll just start there since convenient. Some of those items appear to have a gold star that says must do. How were those identified and not? I mean, granted, we must do everything we can possibly think of, but you got to start somewhere. I understand that. So how were those items identified as the must do's, or what does that mean?
So we know that our principals are expert leaders of improvement. And so based on the needs in their school building, the current reality of their school building, they need to think about what is the best way for us to collect evidence that supports our theory of action and what we're trying to do to improve outcomes. Touchpoint coaching, that relationship building, checking in with you in your classroom, asking how your year is going, offering if you need anything, leaving a note, those kinds of things. We know that all of our staff need that and need that support. The Elliott, of course, is measuring K-12 student engagement. That's a key and important metric that's part of our Big Four attendance, behavior, engagement, the Elliott, and on track. And then, of course, evaluations are required and an important part of teachers growing and all of our growing. And so we established those 3 must-dos, recognizing that principals may determine that they want to build out how they're collecting evidence based on the needs of their school.
Thank you. And actually that, of course, wasn't my biggest question, but it just was the most convenient at the moment. I know that every employee of the OPS system is not happy with those numbers. I don't doubt that there's a single person sitting back going, well, that's pretty good. And I know that we are doing everything that we can think of. And I just want to, first of all, commend you on some of the information that you have shared with the board over the course of the year in terms of your data collection. One was developing the on-track data so you can almost on a weekly basis identify which kids are not on track anymore and therefore be able to do what any intervention you identify. The other is the one that you shared with us at our last board workshop, which I can't remember what slide that was on, but it identifies being able to pinpoint who has the highest attendance issues, behavior issues, and I can't remember what the third one was. But again, being able to pinpoint those students that need attention and identifying the adults in the building that can give them that attention. Anybody in the building that student has a relationship with. So I just hopefully we communicated during the workshops how impressive that was, but I just wanted to take a second to do that too. It was interesting to me that our exited ELs have the highest graduation rate, but our ELs have the highest dropout rate. So what can we do to turn our focus on our ELs? Or is it that there's, I mean, because that was 40%, I think, the dropout rate. Is that largely because they may not even stay in Omaha? Or, I mean, what does that attributable to?
Excuse me, so I had a question on that also. Is that, can you put slide 11 back up? Is that what, I think that was the topic slide?
That wasn't the dropout one, but it had the... That's graduation, dropout is later. Do you want the dropout or the graduation?
Go ahead, you go with yours.
No, they're both the same question.
Jamie will talk to you a bit more about our EL programming and what we're doing to work on this very question that you've asked. But to your question about exited versus those who are current ELs, that's largely a function of time within U.S. schools or within our schools. And so one point that we kind of discussed as we were wanting to share this data was we understand that when students come in 9th or 10th grade, they've been older, they might not have had coursework. So they have a little more time before they can start graduation bearing credits. So it's largely a function of time, but I'll let Jamie talk about the specifics of the what.
That makes sense.
Good evening. One of the things, as you mentioned, we're really proud of our exited EL students, and we know that the standards that they're able to demonstrate in terms of their understanding of language on the ALPA 21 assessment, that's what demonstrates they reach proficiency and then they exit, that those indicators are really a very strong match to the standards that we want all of our students to be able to reach in terms to be able to participate and earn their credits successfully in their classes. What we're looking at in terms of our programming to support English learners in reaching proficiency is looking at our data and doing frequent progress monitoring checks. The state has outlined the expectation that most students should be able to meet proficiency within about a 6-year time frame. So looking at our on track for making progress measure is one key indicator that we'll be looking at with schools. We also know that offering our summer learning is important for our students to be able to earn additional accrual credits. This summer we did have several students, 986 accrual credits were earned by our English learners this summer, which is wonderful and getting them closer to graduating. And then looking at our students who are still with us, who have opportunity to continue and graduate as part of a 5-year, 6-year cohort is also one of the things that we'll be focused on to make sure that those students who are still with us are being successful. And then finally, two of our main strategies ongoing are just focusing on building all of our teachers' capacity to meet the needs of English learners. So building into all of our teachers through professional learning so that they feel confident in meeting the needs of students in their classrooms and helping them to access the grade level content by supporting their language learning needs. That's a really important focus for us and aligns really well with our literacy focus. And then looking at data on an ongoing basis with our schools. Those are some of the key ways that we're helping to keep our students on track and increasing the English learner graduation.
Thank you. I just have one more question. It's not a second language question. If we could look at the slide, which I can't remember what it is, the one that shows ethnic groups graduation. I think American Indian is the first one, and I think white, yeah, that one right there. Thank you very much. The elephant in the room is that our Black or African American students and our Hispanic students are doing significantly worse than every other ethnic group. And I think we can all assume that it doesn't have anything to do with ability, so it has something to do with something else. And the data programs that you guys have developed identify absences and behaviors and on track and all of that, but what, if anything, are we doing, or can we do, or have you considered doing, that address what appears to be ethnic issues? And, you know, maybe even, and I know that Ricky and the Empowerment Network do this a lot with their students, you know, what do those students think is getting in the way that we should be looking at? Because I know we can find the kids that are falling off the grid, but again, just looking at that, I see ethnic groups that are struggling. And I don't know what, if anything, in our data collection helps us address what makes those groups struggle more. Now, I know the answer, it has a lot to do with income levels and mobility and all those things, but it still is, it is what it is.
Yes.
Not a question, just an observation, I guess. But if you have an answer, that would be great.
I don't have the answer, but our 360 dashboard does have the ability to disaggregate data into these student groups and English learner level. So schools will be able to see, of these chronically absent students or non-chronically absent students who have an EL level of 3, for example, how many of them are on track. And then we can generate, all right, these are those 97 students at a high school, and then dig deeper into those very questions that you're asking around what is the student experience, what is the family experience. We are doing some work and have over the last couple of years around family engagement with empathy interviews alongside our staff to understand the lived experience of our staff, students, and families. And so being able to understand at a smaller group level who specifically are these students, and then deploy those tools such as empathy interviews, engagement strategies, and so forth should make our response more robust.
Ms. Juarez, did you have a follow-up?
Okay, so my concerns, of course, are the same thing that has been brought up, but so I'm wondering, if you have, let's say, immigrant students are coming into our school system who may not have had any education at all from wherever they're arriving, and how is it that you really go about trying to get the concept across to their parents now that they're here, you know, how important education is and the impact really that it's going to have on their life? You know, the time goes by really quick, unfortunately. And I'm just concerned, how do you even approach that with the parents? I mean, do you try to do that one-on-one? Do you try to have a group session? I'm just curious how you really try to tackle that.
One of our strongest programs that we are able to offer is through the parent involvement program, our family involvement program that happens at the Welcome Center, and we also have a satellite location at Prairie Wind. We reach out to our parents. Our newest arrived parents are usually our focus, inviting them to register to come and do adult learning. We have adult English classes. We have family literacy programs for adults and their little ones who are preschool age but not in preschool or kindergarten yet. And through those classes, one of the main ways that we're engaging them, of course, is through their desire to learn English. But everything that we're focusing on is helping them understand how to navigate the U.S. education system. So we offer cultural orientation sessions for them, bringing a variety of resources from the community, like connecting them to the Omaha Public Library, taking them on field trips to the Holland Center so that they can experience what that is like. Next year, we're looking at some other ways that we can more directly connect our families who are participating in those programs to understand what the school day might look like for their students. Granted, in a district as large as ours, we're not meeting with every new family, but we are working with our EL teachers and our schools to make sure that our newest families are aware of our family involvement program and being really strategic in the ways that we're connecting with them and how we're helping them learn what Omaha Public Schools has to offer them and how they can engage with their child's education.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand, like, when is it that a social worker would get involved in trying to assist the teachers, you know, with tackling some of these problems with school attendance? I mean, is it an event-based thing? How do the social workers become involved? Do we have enough to try to address our needs?
I think it can be in a variety of ways, whether it's coming directly from a team of teachers who is noticing some things and they reach out to the school counselor and connect with the school social worker. I think it is an opportunity that someone is noticing, meaning whether it's a school counselor, whether it's the teacher, and they're reaching out directly to the social worker, or if they're coming in at a meeting with us when we're having the first conversation and we're knowing that there's some additional supports that are needing to be put into place, we're willing to try to figure out and make that connection happen, whether it's with community partners or with our social workers. I think we're always making sure that we're trying to put the right resources in the right places to help support our students.
One more question. So my last question is, like, if you have some students who are really, you know, successful in our system, not having any problems, let's just say some other Latino students, okay? Do you actually try to do like a buddy system that, you know, that they could talk with the fellow student to try to encourage them and also try to emphasize the importance of school and, you know, just talking with one another? Do you guys, are there opportunities like that?
Yes, and I would love for Jamie to talk about the Thrive program. Share a little bit about Thrive. I'm going to have Jamie share a little bit about Thrive and how we're making sure to engage young leaders.
Yeah, thank you for approving the contract for next year's Thrive Leadership Club with Empowering Student Leaders. Thrive Leadership Club is offered at some select schools based on a large number of EL and refugee students. And the concept of Thrive Leadership Club is to build up student leaders. And so they do a lot of activities that help our students understand how to engage with the community. They'll design service learning projects such as doing reading with, partnering the older high school students with our elementary age students and doing reading with them, or visiting a senior center and putting on a cultural event to engage with our older individuals in the community. And then they're doing regular investing in those students and helping them understand how to become leaders. A lot of students that we have who have returned, who I've had opportunity to interview for various positions, a number of them will actually name Thrive Leadership Club as one of the student opportunities that they have had that has brought them, helped them become a leader. So I think that's really exciting. And then there's also some different partnering that's happening with Strive Mentoring, partnering some of our refugee and EL students who have been in the Omaha Public Schools for a little bit longer, being intentionally matched with students who are newer and helping them to be mentors to mentors. So a lot of really positive things that are happening there. Currently, our Thrive Leadership Club is offered at Hale Middle School, Benson, Northwest, Central High School, and South High School.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to hear about those programs. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Ms. Cracky?
Some of what I'm saying is a comment not to be answered, perhaps. This is the most important thing we do, and we should be having this kind of conversation about our curriculum and what is happening every single meeting. So when it's like bunched up, and we do get the information, and the workshop was wonderful. But it's like we need it all the time. We need to keep figuring it out, stressing it, knowing what's happening every year. I mean, I don't want to wait till we get a big presentation. I want it to happen. It's interesting that we're doing academies and pathways, and we seem to be getting lower and lower results. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, and I'd like to know how many people graduated in summer school, and I know 25 at Burke. I don't know of the other high schools, what their rate of graduation was this summer over spring. That would be an interesting number to know. And then I want to know if there's a correlation of the attendance of the parents at the conferences and the grades and how the student does. I want to know if you know and can give us that number correlation. I think that's something that we ought to know if we're making a difference there. But I know that we have back to school nights at most schools, and I don't know how to stress that we want the parent there at that back to school night. That is the most important first link that we have with our parents. And in the high schools, I would think they would love to go, maybe go with their child, and then I go in when I see teachers talking to the parents at the back to school night and kind of listen to it and see what parents come and in what areas in the school they are coming to those rooms. That makes a difference, and we can zero in on that too. But it's overwhelming looking at it, and it is not what we want to see. And I want us to improve, and I want us to do it as quickly as we can. And I want to hear a report like more often. If we can have something happening at every meeting that's very connected with how we are progressing, I would appreciate it, and I think maybe the public would too. I don't know what else to say. Anybody want to answer any of my questions?
I'm not sure I can answer all of them, but some of those that where you're asking specific data questions, we'll follow up with you and get that information. Today, Mr. Head and I had an opportunity to attend summer graduation for multiple pathways. There was about 40 kids. Next level learning just concluded, so that summer graduation is important, and we'll connect it to further reports. I blame the previous board secretary that this report is so late. Because this is 22-23 data, and it is a lagging indicator, and we're late in presenting it. We're late in presenting the behavior data, and we'll do better with that as well. So I agree completely. There's a lot here, and it's late, and we'll do a better job of getting that to you in a timely manner.
I really don't know what else to say. I mean, I'm very eager to move on and get something going and hear what's going on and what we're doing to make these changes or get the parents. I still say, and I don't know how lucky or we can be in getting our parents involved at every level. I talked about they do sign contracts in other districts. And while every parent is not going to follow through because they signed a contract, there are some who might be guilty enough knowing I said I would do this, and so I'm going to follow through and help out. And some won't do that. But you got to start somewhere so that we get something going. And so if we could look at the idea of a student-parent school contract at the beginning of the year, I'd like that. I don't know if any of you would be interested in that, but I'm interested in it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in real quick to follow up on Mr. Ray's comments before we turn to Mr. Thielen. So this is 22-23 data that we're looking at, correct? And so I know we've spent a lot of time over the last year and a half talking about the Elliott, the learning framework, and a lot of the new systems that you've been working on implementing, that Mr. Ray's been pushing, that you've been pushing, that this board's been supporting. But a lot of that we're not going to see until this current school year's data, correct? All right, so this, the data that we're looking at now is prior to, anything that we've been talking about, we've been working on. So when can we expect to see that data? Sometime this fall, hopefully. Obviously, Mr. Ray said we attended the last Next Level Learning graduation this morning, so it's a little bit early to get that data, but what are your thoughts?
I believe the state finalizes the graduation and dropout data and the cohort information in the fall. And so we'll be preparing another report formatted similarly to the receipt of report that you got today. And so we're looking at a January timeline for that receipt of report and to be able to present to you. I believe last year it was between October and November that we received the final data from the state.
Thank you. And obviously, we're still way too early. Any, don't ask it. Any anecdotal, anything you're hearing, any projections you can make as to what that data is going to look like, what it's going to tell us?
We have a strong feeling it'll be better. How about that? I'd hate to commit to anything. We've worked really hard to make changes. Principals in the room will agree on how much they've attempted and worked with kids and worked with school improvement. I know hope is not a strategy, or maybe it is, but we do hope. We believe it'll be better. I'm not going to weigh in on a percentage, but we hope to get that data in front of the board as soon as we have it finalized. And I think it's important to point out, too, that it's probably been over a decade since we've presented graduation rates in a public format. So it is very heavy. You're not used to seeing it as a board. Staff is not used to seeing it presented this way. But we're committed to making sure that we do this every year so you know where we're at, and so it doesn't seem so heavy. And that goes with the behavior information as well. It's been quite a few years since we publicly shared the behavior data, but we know it's part of our story and it's part of our journey to do better, so it won't be so heavy.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Ms. Christopherson, Ms. Kramer, both thank you for the work that you've done as well. Mr. Thielen.
Thank you, Mr. Head. So I think first, just kind of along the lines of what Mr. Ray was just saying, so thank you for presenting this transparent and unvarnished look at our data. The levels you've presented are obviously bracing in some ways, but the candor and demonstrated engagement with this data by the administration lends a lot of credibility to the commitments to changing outcomes. Likewise, over the last year and a half, you've presented learning framework, other ongoing work, acceleration of the gathering of the robust data, and engaging in data-driven decision-making. You've provided research and reasoning for the foundational and continuous improvement efforts that have been ongoing. So again, engaging in that hard foundational work and bringing us along as you've done it and providing the rationale and reasoning goes a long way in understanding what our expectations are and how we expect outcomes to change. I think I spoke earlier this year when we voted to make Mr. Ray superintendent. This work is not easy. There's a lot that has to be done, and it will take time. But you've already started to show what those efforts are, and we look forward to continuing to see this data presented in this way in a timely manner, and we look forward to seeing how those efforts play out. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cassidy?
Thank you. I get to go last, maybe? Anybody else? Okay, I was just going to say, it's tough to go last after all of this material because I think each of you I kept looking at my notes, I'm like, Jane's hitting that one. So anyway, first of all, thank you ladies for the presentation. Yes, as Mr. Ray noted, very heavy. I think it's the heaviest thing on our agenda, which thankfully that's good. I don't want anything else besides this tonight. But yeah, it's tough to find positives in this data, what you presented tonight. It's tough to hear but a lot of it is not surprising. So I think that we probably all expected to hear some of this data come from you this evening. One thing, though, that I did really appreciate, two phrases. Teachers are the most important improvers. I love that because I think that that's the core of where our work is going to begin and where we can see improvement. So thank you for that. And I think, obviously, as Mr. Thielen so eloquently spoke, we as a board can all see that the work is there, the tools have been developed, they're in place, and they're being utilized. So we can see the road that you folks are all traveling to get us to improvement. So that is appreciated. My question kind of comes from something that I think Mrs. Christofferson said. Alignment from elementary and beyond is what's really important, that it can't just start in 9th grade, right? I mean, these issues and all of the factors that go into why these students are not graduating and all of, as Ms. Ernberger said, there's challenges economically, all of that, it has to be addressed before 9th grade. So I know we have a lot of things in place, like our student support liaisons, our social workers, our counselors. Can you talk a little bit about what is in place, what we can do at those elementary levels?
So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to let Suzanne speak specifically about Articulation Day and the work. And I think you've heard a little bit about that, but it also connects to this. And one of the components we've been talking specifically within curriculum and instruction support is what are we making sure that we are doing and talking about when we're meeting and putting together our work? Because what we're talking about here, you should also know, if I'm in high school, I should know this is also happening in elementary school, and really understanding that vertical alignment, that scope and sequence of the work. As we're developing curriculum guides, you're knowing and understanding what happened the year before and what's going to be happening that following year, because it all is intertwined and it all makes a difference on how well it happened here. And if it didn't happen where we wanted it to be, how are we making a difference in providing the right scaffolds and the interventions to follow up for students who might not have even been with us the year before. And I think it really starts even within our own department, having those conversations and creating a sense of readiness there. And I know the collaborative work that we're doing on Articulation Days and helping and better prepare. Even the Portrait of a Graduate isn't just senior year. We're helping to develop all of those skills. As soon as a young person enters, how are we helping to build those 6 attributes of a Portrait of a Grad? And I'm going to let Suzanne talk specifically about Articulation Day.
So this was our 3rd year of hosting an Articulation Day, and now we have those improvement days. Thanks for your vote, of course, on that. And those are important pieces of, to the point that Mr. Thielen made, of the infrastructure that we're trying to build here around improvement. And so for the last 3 Articulation Days, we've been working to build the capacity of teachers and leaders to be looking at student data, looking at the vertical progression of learner experiences aligned to the Portrait of a Graduate. And then this year, our middle schools went and visited our high schools, and our elementary school transitioning terminal grade teachers went and visited our middle schools. And so we're also starting to build that conversation and those relationships between elementary to middle and middle to high, so that transition is stronger. We know that transitions are the most important thing, one of them for students. And in the report that you received, there's an important point about 9th grade attendance. We know that when students are chronically absent in 9th grade, they're less likely to graduate. So those are important metrics that, as we continue to develop our 360 dashboard, we use the structures of improvement days and Articulation Days alongside this just-in-time data. We're going to be able to tailor our supports even tighter around what our students need. And for example, as a high school, we might consider those first 30 days of 9th grade are so important when it comes to attendance. And so we're really monitoring that more than weekly or more than a monthly meeting, those kinds of things. But those first 30 days of 9th grade are so important. And so then how is what we're doing in those first 30 days connected to the conversation we had on Articulation Day, and how are we leveraging our improvement day time to look at those data points in concert with what's happening in the classroom to plan our next action. So all of those pieces we've been building over the last 2 years hopefully are going to support movement in this on-track data over time.
And our freshman academies are going to be so much more critical than we even imagined. So, well, thank you. That does help. Just continue on the road that you folks are all on. I mean, we are all behind you. We appreciate the work and can definitely see it. So hopefully the next time we get these reports, we'll have some positive numbers. But we will be looking to Benson and Burke. So thank you, though. All kidding aside, thank you to all the principals here, because we're going to be looking to all of you for these numbers to improve. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
This is real easy, not necessarily a question, and I think I do know the answer, but the report card is a living, breathing kind of document, the dashboard, so you'll be able to see that consistently on a regular basis.
Yes, so the individual dashboards, attendance, behavior, and on-track update overnight. And so, for example, with on-track, if a student starts failing, schools are able to see that right away. And then the new 360 dashboard, that will also update in real time. So that's where that just-in-time piece comes in, so the interventions can be more timely.
Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? All right, well, Chief Christofferson, Chief Kramer, thank you again for the presentation. Thank you so much for your hard work on this. And I, for one, am excited to see the data when it comes out for this school year, so we can all realize the fruits of your and everyone in this room's hard labor over the last few years. So thank you again. We greatly appreciate it. Moving on to item I-1B, the suspension and expulsion report. Speakers Dr. Amy Williams, Ms. Danielle Starkey, and Mr. Scott Schmidt-Bonney. Turn it over first to Mr. Ray for comment.
So to continue the heavy conversations, we're going to talk about suspension and expulsion data from the 22-23 school year. Research was able to pull some trend data, again, not the final data, but our intent is to present the 23-24 data to you as soon as that is finalized. So again, another heavy topic, but one that we understand is important and we can't look at, because as I said in the beginning, we can't avoid it. It is all connected. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Williams.
Thank you. Good evening, President Head, Vice President Smith, members of the Board of Education, and Superintendent Ray. Thank you for the introduction. I want to say we also have Chief Utterbeck here. She is the Chief Officer of Student Community Services and also leading this work. We are here to share a review of discipline data from the 2022-23 school year, along with a discussion of identified priorities, trends that we see from 2023-24, and also identified next steps. We will start this evening with a short description of what we mean when we discuss discipline in OPS. The Omaha Public Schools have a dedicated staff, and sincere efforts to effectively manage discipline are in place and underway. The most important work we do to support student discipline is the work we do around prevention. We know that if we create spaces that students perceive are positive and predictable, then students are more likely to come to school and engage in the positive learning experiences that we plan for them. In order to create and maintain those spaces where students feel a sense of welcome and belonging, we utilize a district-wide multi-tiered systems of supports for behavior, or MTSSB. As part of that framework, we know that we must equip students with the ability to sense and recognize their best self, recognize and have the language to describe their emotions, and to recognize that their emotional state impacts their behavior. As we are responding to misbehavior, we know that setting up interventions prior to needing them is critical. This is the work we do at the higher tiers of MTSSB. For instance, we know that some students might need to participate in a grief group or in an attendance group. School counselors will put those on the schedule, and they will get the curriculum ready ahead of time. We know some students need additional adult attention and support, so we will set up systems of check-in and check-out and have those ready to go at the beginning of the year. Having those interventions in place helps us to respond quickly when students demonstrate a need. And as we have discussed at length in this room, the Student Code of Conduct serves two main functions. First, it is a communication tool for all of our stakeholders. The code clearly defines behavior that is unacceptable at school, along with consequences that may be applied. The code also serves as a guideline for our school leaders as they navigate responding to misbehavior at school. But you need to understand that even at the level of office discipline, the focus is heavily on prevention, intervention, and instruction, while at the same time working to maintain a safe school environment. As you review that 2022-23 report included in this presentation, this slide provides some context to the information that is included. In alignment to our commitment to instructional discipline and fostering supportive learning environments, OPS does not expel students in grades pre-K through 6. Additionally, beginning in the 2023-24 school year, which is not reflected in this report, we no longer suspend students in pre-K through grade 2 in alignment with the recent change to Nebraska statute. State and federal statute does require an expulsion for misbehavior involving a firearm. This report does group both short and long-term suspensions together. Disciplinary responses are tailored to fit circumstances, with suspensions varying in length from a partial day up to 19 school days. This speaks to the challenge that our school leaders face in addressing real issues of school safety related to some student behavior. That being said, approximately 97% of suspensions are 5 days or fewer. And as we review this data, please know that we are eminently aware that every table and every graph drills down to an individual child who had a really hard time at school on a particular day. We also know that the vast majority of kids are doing what they need to be doing at school the vast majority of the time. But when we say every student, every day prepared for success, we mean that. And we know that this report indicates that we definitely have work to do throughout our system. Another thing to keep in mind is that the suspension and expulsion report is specific to exclusionary resolutions. So if you look at this graphic, the blue shaded resolutions are exclusionary. Just blue shaded resolutions from the year 2022-23 are included in this report. You may be able to see on this slide that there were 94,849 resolutions. Later in this report, you'll see that is higher than the number of behavior events, and that is because sometimes multiple resolutions are applied. For example, a student may be assigned a detention and also have a parent conference or a conference with the referring teacher. A student may be assigned a suspension, but also referred back to the IEP team or the SAT team for further intervention. Most of our office discipline does not exclude students from the learning environment. For example, in 2022-23, of the 94,849 resolutions, 23% were exclusionary, but we do need to be mindful that 72.7%, or just shy of 69,000 resolutions, did not exclude children from the learning environment. This is a reflection of the proactive work that school staff do to keep students in school every single day. When we do exclude, it is most often for very serious misbehavior. To provide some clarification on what behaviors lead to exclusion, here you can see the top 5 reasons for each of the exclusionary resolutions applied in 2022-23. You can see that these are serious and very challenging behaviors, which are often a safety risk. You can see that the resolutions progress, as the resolutions progress to more severe, so do the behaviors. And you'll also note here that we do report in-school suspensions to the state as an exclusion, despite students remaining in the school environment. As we look to reduce the resolution for these most serious behavior events, our focus is absolutely on prevention. As we have reviewed this behavior report, we have identified 3 key areas for improvement, and you can see those here. We are particularly concerned that our exclusionary resolutions are not proportionate across subgroups. I'm going to give you some examples. Specifically in the 2022-23 report, we see that students who are eligible for educational benefits are 3 times as likely to experience suspension. For students with an IEP who receive special education services, they are twice as likely as other students to receive a suspension. Middle school suspensions are high. Nearly a quarter of middle school students experienced a suspension in the year 2022-23. For Black middle school students, that number is closer to 1/3 of students experiencing a suspension. District-wide, 26% of Black students experienced a suspension in 2022-23, compared with 13.2% for all other students. It is too early to provide this level of specificity for the 2023-24 data. However, we can preliminarily see that middle school students are still receiving our highest rates of suspension. We can also see similar trends in our disproportionality. This evening, we will discuss how we are working to improve outcomes for all of our students. As you saw in the last slide, the vast majority of suspensions and expulsions result from behavior that poses a threat to the safety of others within the school. School administrators face the ongoing challenge of balancing support for students displaying unsafe behavior with maintaining a safe school environment. We can preliminarily see that several categories of dangerous behaviors were down in the 2023-24 data, and we want to continue the trend of reducing those events.
Continuous professional learning on our multi-tiered systems of support for behavior, or MTSSB framework, remained a top priority this past 2023-2024 school year. Elementary Positive Action Center facilitators received targeted training in de-escalation strategies and the reteaching of expected behaviors. Principals and administrators sharpened their expertise on behavior intervention planning, and MTSSB teams expanded learning on evidence-based prevention and intervention strategies. This ongoing focus on continuous improvement reinforces our commitment to preventative and proactive supports. Additionally, Tier 1 MTSSB teams across the district met monthly to review student data and make informed decisions. By analyzing real-time behavior event data in the behavior dashboard, teams identify trends, strengths, and areas for improvement. This data-driven approach enables teams to proactively prevent behavioral issues, strategically reteach expected behaviors, and engage in plan, do, check, act cycles of continuous improvement monthly. Work also centered on establishing robust interventions for students that are evidence-based and can be implemented with existing staff resources. We aim to offer additional layers of support to students who may need it, helping them improve their behavior and academic performance. A key piece of this work has been developing staff capacity to develop and implement effective behavior intervention plans for students with our most challenging behaviors. MTSSB teams at this level meet regularly to discuss student needs and progress monitor students and interventions. A district behavior coaching and consultation team that is multidisciplinary was also established this past year to build capacity and skills for school-based teams to support students receiving special education services in their current setting. Board-certified behavior analysts within the district also supported this work. These priorities highlight the sincere efforts made by our dedicated staff to effectively prevent and respond to behavior in our schools and programs. In 2015-2016, Omaha Public Schools began training school staff on Tier 1 MTSSB, laying the groundwork for its implementation. The rollout occurred in 3 distinct phases or groups of schools and programs throughout the 2016-2017 school year. As part of this process, there was a strong emphasis on collecting accurate behavior referral data to better understand student needs and tailor prevention and intervention efforts accordingly. The data here reflects the number of student behavior referrals per school year beginning in the 2014-2015 year. Through our preliminary data for 23-24. It is important to note that the 19-20 school year only reflects 3/4 of the school year and that the 20-21 school year was impacted by remote learning. Since returning to full in-person learning after the pandemic, there has been a notable decrease in behavior referrals. These numbers have remained relatively consistent for the past 3 years, and we are working diligently on continuous improvement. We would also be remiss if we did not mention that this past school year, approximately 40,000 students in the Omaha Public Schools did not receive a behavior referral. While our natural inclination is to assist and improve, it is equally important to acknowledge and value the existing successes of our students and staff.
Good evening. As a reminder, trends can be viewed in isolation or relative to other trends as we seek to create information from what otherwise would just be simple numbers. In isolation, the trend we see for in-school suspension shows a decline in use prior to the pandemic, another slight decrease from 21-22 to 2022-23, and then an increase in in-school suspensions anticipated for the 23-24 school year. Similar to in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, regardless of if it's short or long-term, that usage declined as well prior to the pandemic. However, unlike in-school suspension, the declines we saw there in 2022-2023, both short and long-term suspensions increased in 2022-2023. Similarly, in-school suspension rates increased as both terms of out-of-school suspensions declined in our anticipated rates for 22-23-24. This suggests schools and programs were able to more rely on options keeping students in school versus excluding them from instruction and suspending them out of school. See those reductions numerically going into the 23-24 school year, again preliminarily, and we would anticipate these to go down as things are cleaned up rather than up. We are seeing that shortest of short-term exclusionary events declining 14.6%, and long-term suspensions, those lasting between 6 and 19 days, declining by 11.2%. Similar to out-of-school suspension trends, again, either short or long-term, declines were noted in expulsions prior to the pandemic in both one semester and full academic year expulsions. Following the pandemic, we saw an increase in 2022-23 and are anticipating significant reductions being identified between the 2022-23 school year and the current school year of 2023-24. Again, those reductions for the semester expulsions are at 18% and a significant 87.5% reduction in full calendar year expulsions anticipated for the 2023-24 school year. Back to Dr. Williams.
Looking at next steps for the upcoming school year, we know that our priority and work is teaching and learning and helping every student to find success at school. We know that student engagement is critical to achieving positive student outcomes, and we know that excellent instruction in every classroom leads to equal access for all students. We are confident in our learning framework and in the Elliott tool for providing us with actionable data around student engagement. The purpose of MTSSB is to implement a framework of systems to create and maintain a system of positive, predictable environments where students can thrive. This report makes it clear that our school environments are not serving all students equitably. Many of our school teams have already started to examine this data very closely and have begun to apply solutions, and this work will continue in the upcoming school year. One area of focus in this work is to make sure that our school environments are tailored to the strengths, needs, and values of each individual school community. We know that when we can identify evidence-based interventions and set them up ahead of time, we can better support kids as soon as we see a problem. This is the work of our Tier 2 MTSSB teams, and we will continue to build this capacity. This includes identifying interventions that have been proven to be effective and providing staff with the professional learning to build that capacity. We also know that we cannot do this work alone. The school is one part of our larger community, and we are working to improve at forging authentic partnerships with whom to engage in this work. At every level, we know that success in this work is about investing in relationships and in building our village. This concludes the overview of the 2022-23 suspension expulsion report, as well as updates from this past 2023-24 school year. What questions can we answer?
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Crackey.
Thank you for your presentation also. And I'd like to ask how many different programs we have occurring in our schools, if we know. I mean, I know that Central is doing Boys Town, and I wonder if anyone else has a specific program that they are using. I know Elementary has some different things too, and there was a grant my niece went on for Edison to use something that we are not using and try that out in their school. So I don't know if you have that available today or if you know that. And when they re-enter school from being on a suspension, we used to have the parent accompany them back and talk through it and go on to their class then. Do we still do that, or is there another way that they come back to school?
So I'll answer your first question first. I don't know every single thing that is going on in every school. When schools bring in outside agencies and outside organizations to assist, they are still working within the MTSSB framework. So Boys Town might come in and assist teachers and staff in how to respond in that moment to misbehavior, how to potentially some strategies on building relationships, and any number of things, but that is all going to be within the framework of MTSSB.
But I know a lot of programs are very helpful, so I hope that they're available for the staff to use or to seek or to have. How do they go about getting certain programs?
I don't have that information, but we can get that
You don't
for
do
you.
that?
I mean, typically it's going to be, a principal is aware of an organization and has a relationship.
Thank you.
Ms. Erdenberger?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Just because I thought it was so smart when he said it, I'm going to repeat something Mr. Thielen said in our last section. But it also confirms what Superintendent Ray was saying too, and that I applaud the transparency, because transparency reflects a commitment to change. If you're hiding your data, then it's easy to conclude you're hoping nobody notices. So I really do appreciate that, and the information that's in here. On slide 10, I know that Mr. Schmidt-Bonny's numbers for 23-24, I mean, we're not talking about a lot of suspensions, but it shows a decrease, and I like to think that that shows a commitment to, which I know has long been our objective, if possible, keeping the kids in school, because the graduation rates we saw in the last presentation must go hand in hand with whether the students are even in the building. So I applaud that, whoever's responsible for those changes there. If you could go to slide 8 just for a second, whoever my slide manager is. I think that's the one that shows student referrals, which are down precipitously. I mean, that's a huge number going down. My concern is, and hopefully whoever's collecting this data is looking into it, this flies in the face of the anecdotal conversations we're having with teachers. I mean, there's not my guess is there's not a single teacher out there that's looking at that and going, yeah, things are a lot more calm in my school. We don't have a lot, I mean, it's just the opposite of, again, anecdotally. So I don't know what those numbers are telling us. They either are telling us that there are, in fact, fewer misbehaviors, if you will, and the teachers still don't remember how many there used to be, or they might be telling us that teachers just aren't referring anymore because of frustration. And it could be either one of them. I hope it's the former. I hope it really is that we have fewer misbehaviors, but hopefully somebody's looking at that to see why it's so different from what appears to be the experience that I'm hearing from teachers. So that's somebody else's job, probably Mr. Schmidt-Bonny's. Oh, you wanted to say something? Thank you.
I was just going to add a comment to that. In that, when also we returned in 21-22, I definitely think we had conversations at times about whether the events were equal in terms of the level of the events that were happening, or if they seemed higher level behavior violations were occurring. And so one of the things that we did have a quick conversation about, and preliminary data is here, is from 2022 to 2023 to this past 23-24 school year, a number of the violations that are more serious in nature, that are safety concerns, did decrease from that 22-23 to this year. So the behavior events are relatively stagnant, but the number of them that were more elevated or higher level is decreasing. And so we're hoping to keep that trend moving forward. And so hopefully that perception will decrease as those higher level events go down as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. One other question about MTSSB. Well, no, two questions. One is we have suspensions and expulsions. Where is reassignment in that information? Or is that a separate number entirely?
So reassignment, because the student is reassigned and at the new school within 5 days, that is reflected in our short-term suspension number.
It seems like it would be useful to have it broken out, and so going forward, if that's not too much trouble, I think it might be useful to see how many kids were sending from one school to another. But again, that's...
No, we definitely collect that, and we can get that for you. It's just not something we report to the state because
And I'm not looking to get it this week either, but next time we have this presentation, that might be useful. And the reason that I'm particularly interested in it is because when I look at the MTSSB, the pyramid that we have in our code of conduct, presumably, and we've talked about a little bit this at the committee level, presumably a student that's getting transferred from school A to school B has already worked their way up towards, you know, in terms of violations or severity of violations. And I just want to know if a kid has progressed to level 3 out of 5, and then you send that person to a different school, are the interventions at level 3 implemented when they go to the next school, or do they start at the bottom of the pyramid and have to misbehave until they get the help that clearly they need?
That's a great question. The receiving school receives quite a bit of information. They receive information about what has worked, what has not worked as well, in addition to the interventions that were in place prior to. And so they work to get the student does not have to misbehave all the way up to the same level in order to continue to get the intervention.
Yeah. I would say too, as you were talking about reassignments and then this piece, a key part of every reassignment conversation is what does the next building need to set up in advance of the student arriving for that student to be successful. And so that's already looking at what tier 3 supports can that building prepare for that we might be able to give that insight so that they can set up a plan for that student when they walk in the door on their first day at the new building.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, President Head, or Vice President Smith, as the case may be.
Thank you. Mr. Thielen?
Thank you, Mr. Head. I guess, first of all, thank you for providing some of the context you did around students that have no referrals. I think that's important to point out. Obviously, we have work to do, and we've got some things to focus on here, but I think it's always good to point that out about the students that are doing well and thriving in our schools. A couple of questions. So slide 8, we've talked a little bit about kind of the decrease there, but I was noting in the note at the bottom that there seemed to be kind of a change in how we counted. And I just wondered if you could quantify how much we think that was changing the number. Is there
Say more about changing the way we count.
So I was looking at the note at the bottom that the data from 2020-21 forward didn't include participants, and maybe I'm reading it incorrectly.
Okay. Scott, give me some help here. I don't think it will impact the status substantially.
Okay.
Agreed. And that was a prior practice. If a kid had a friend, witnessing them engage in a bad behavior, they'd be identified in some instances as a participant or in others as a witness. Some of those have been excluded, and if the student was actively engaged in either supporting that behavior vocally or engaging in it themselves, they would have their own situation to deal with and be referenced in this data likewise. So if 2 students were sent to the office, one was a participant, one was the instigator, so to speak, they would have been treated separately in prior data sets. In this, they both get a referral for going to the office together for the issue that they were both mutually involved in, though to varying degrees, which may then ultimately affect the resolution as part of the referral.
Okay. So I think both of you sort of indicated you don't think that that's a significant change in the numbers.
No, not at all. In fact, if it were, it would likely increase it because then they would have 2 separate counts instead of having the participant be relatively held harmless and only the initial instigator, the primary instigating part of the event being identified in the referral.
Right. On slide 11, I think Mr. Schmidt-Bonney, you sort of drew a conclusion from that we are probably more, relying more on other resolutions. And I think that that's accurate, and I think it kind of goes back to slide 8. I just wanted to kind of confirm that the denominator there is the same, that the number of referrals is kind of consistent across those 2 years. That's it.
Correct. And while it is just a hypothesis, I would also add to it that we know in-school suspension is a staffing-dependent intervention. It requires someone to be in school with the child. And so that we see that increase while staffing challenges have still persisted is especially, I think, speaks to that hypothesis of effort being applied in that area, because it is certainly significant, as is the 74-75% of resolutions not resulting in exclusion. Those conferences, those efforts day in and day out by our leaders and their staff with the parents of the student or their guardian are very time dependent. And so really that is the significant work supported by these staff and those staff in our schools to maintain that enrollment and to really teach the required behavior.
At one point you talked a little bit about tailoring some of the supports to the school community. I was wondering if you maybe made some examples of how that might play out in practice, what that might look like.
So I think that's what you're going to see as we are making some adjustments to how we do things to improve our outcomes, particularly our outcomes that are disproportionate. One evidence-based, the PBIS Center said that school systems can either reflect a biased society or they can provide a buffer against that biased society. And we want to provide the buffer. So when we talk about making some adjustments to our MTSSB practices and to other practices across our school system, we know that we need to do a better job gaining authentic voice from our community, gaining authentic voice from our students and our families, and really making sure that we are reflecting the strengths, the needs, and the values of those individuals as we build those environments so that they can be just the highest amount of protective for those kids, those particular kids.
Thank you. So I think as we talked a little bit about that, I think as on slide 7, we talked about some of the efforts, the ongoing efforts. I would say kind of unlike some of the instructional and attendance-focused efforts that we've seen presentations on over the last year, I think this is an area I'm less familiar with, and I'd welcome deeper dive if that's if there's an opportunity for that in our workshops.
What you're not going to hear is a big change in what we're doing. Mm-hmm. We know that we need to have engaging practices and engaging strategies in the classroom on grade level, and that's really an equity piece. We know that MTSSB is how we build positive, predictable environments for kids where they can thrive. It's really a matter of continuing to build capacity and continuing to work with our partners to gain the technical assistance to really tackle these issues that are extremely difficult and are pervasive across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray.
I was going to try to jump in on Ms. Erdenberger's question. If we can go back to slide 8. So in this slide, it does show a drop for, anticipated drop for 23-24, and you hit it a little bit too. While these numbers are lower, or anticipated to be lower than 22-23, we don't in any way want to dismiss what teachers are experiencing, what principals are experiencing, what students are experiencing in our buildings. So this, just because there was a slight drop, that doesn't mean we've solved everything. It doesn't mean that we are unaware of what's happening every day in our schools. So we can't dismiss what teachers and schools and principals and students are experiencing every day.
Mr. Ray, just to respond, actually, I wasn't looking at the post-COVID numbers on that slide so much as the post-COVID compared to the pre-COVID. And no, I appreciate what you're saying because been there, done that. Yep. But it just seemed the difference between the pre-COVID numbers, which were 90 to 100, yep, to the post-COVID numbers, which are in the low 80s, again, reflects a whole bunch of different things. And I just really appreciate that the people that are following these numbers are trying to figure out what that actually is telling us. And I definitely appreciate our principals for supporting our staff. I know that they are undertaking an initiative this fall that will involve a lot of administrative support. And so good luck with that ahead of time. Thank you very much. I'm sure it will be very much appreciated by the teachers. Thank you.
And for the audience, that was Jane's and my first fight. So that was our first fight publicly. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cassidy.
I'm not sure what my question even was after that. I'm gonna have to get in on this fight. No, seriously, thank you for the presentation, first of all. The one thing that you stated, 25% of the highest group is middle school. First of all, is that a trend or is that a normal statistic? I guess I would have not known who would have been higher, high school or middle school. So is that normal?
I cannot speak to the trend data necessarily, but I can tell you that that's typically our highest referrals and suspensions.
I was trying to think back if we've had this type of presentation since I've been on the board. If we did, I wasn't at that meeting, but that was a little shocking to me. I really didn't know which group would be higher. So on that point then, are there additional efforts or tools that are in place that we do differently at our middle schools than we do at our high schools to combat that? That's probably a tough question.
I just wanted to mirror off when we just talked about graduation rates. And Chief Kramer was talking about articulation day. That's one of those big pieces, is that transition from elementary to middle school. And so as Chief Kramer discussed, really having those elementary teachers go to our middle schools and talk about that middle school transition, what's expected in middle school, with the hope that then we're able to bring that information back. And in those last few months of 5th or 6th grade at those elementary schools, we're able to focus more on how are we setting them up to be successful academically and behaviorally as they move to middle school. And so continuing to leverage those transition pieces will be really important as we think about setting students up for success ahead of time in our middle schools. And a number of our middle schools are working diligently in welcome camps and other pieces this summer on really being explicit about setting students up for success with their behavioral expectations as well.
Thank you. I think middle school is the toughest transition, so it does make complete sense.
For sure, that's true.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? Ms. Cranky?
I do want to thank the principals for coming tonight. I don't know how many of you have attended our meetings before, but I think it must be interesting for you to see our discussions and what we're thinking about, what we see on the chart. So it's really nice to have you come, so thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, colleagues? All right. Seeing none, Dr. Williams, Ms. Starkey, Mr. Schmidt-Bonney, Chief Utterback, thank you for the presentation and the information. We greatly appreciate it. Moving on, item I-1C, the OSERS Ad Hoc Committee update. Ms. Erdenberger.
Thank you, President Head. The OSERS Ad Hoc Board Committee met last Monday, July 8th by team, and Mr. Head, Dr. Holman, myself, Superintendent Ray, Mr. Ryan, and Dr. McFarland were in attendance. I know that Ms. Cassidy was trying to attend, but she had a million other things that the Monday after July 4th were taking over.
Yeah, unfortunately, my boss would not let me get off of a mandatory meeting, so sorry about that.
Go figure, go figure. Well, we are almost there. We only have one more, maybe two more board meetings before we have successfully transferred the administration of the OSERS pension plan to Lincoln, to NPERS, as the case may be. The statute requires that be completed by September 1st, and according to the report at the committee, we are completely on track for that to happen. The OSERS data will all be transferred down there on August 26th, and the September payment for OSERS is going to be moved ahead a couple of days. It's my understanding that we're going to be making it on August 29th out of Omaha, so to speak, and therefore the Lincoln people will not have to make that September payment the day after they become the administrator. So they'll have. So we're moving our payment up a couple days so that that payment can be made, and it gives the Lincoln people a chance to fully line up to make the payments from then on out. Any documentation received by officers after August 23rd will be saved and handed over to NPERS. Effectively, we will not be conducting business starting around August 23rd. One of the items that we discussed and was highlighted in the recent state auditor's report was that there were some overpayments being made to some of the OSERS beneficiaries. It's a function of a statutory change that was made in 2005, and it was not implemented to its full extent in 2005. So since 2005, some beneficiaries have been receiving overpayments. At this point in time, there's about 550 beneficiaries that are receiving an overpayment. Again, this is out of about 5,400 participants. Most of those monthly payments are under $20 each, although some may be as high as $60. And we are consulting with counsel about how to proceed. There are some tax laws that apply to maintaining our pension fund status, if you will. So we are consulting with counsel on how to move forward with that. We anticipate that we will not be asking funds back all the way back to 2005, but we may have to do so, change the payments on a going forward basis. But again, we're working with counsel to come up with whatever is the best answer for our beneficiaries and to maintain our tax status. One of the things that I did want to point out that we also discussed and was somewhat highlighted in the article that was from yesterday was the drop in value or investment value, if you will, of our investments. Again, to remind all of my fellow board members that the decision was made to bring our assumed investment rate down to match the state investment assumption rate. State investment assumption rate is 7%. We had been at 8%, I believe. So over the course of the last 4 years, we have brought that assumption down, which by definition reduces your projected value of your assets because you're not assuming a 8% return anymore. We are now closer to assuming a 7%. And while I don't want to suggest that we are not still paying attention to the change in our investment ratios, and as you know, the board has regularly authorized payment of more than the actuarial required amount each year. Part of that loss of investment value has to do with the change in the investment assumptions. And I think that's everything. It's a report. I will give all the board members a copy of this. I wanted to confirm it with Mr. Ryan before I gave the report. I'll make his changes and get it out to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, colleagues? All right, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Erdenberger, for your leadership on the committee. I know it's been active, it's been engaging last couple of years, but the end is near, so to speak, with the transition looming in September. So thank you. Moving on, item I1D, the Policy Committee update, and if you'd like to just roll to I1E when you're done, Mr. Thielen, as well.
All right, so the Policy Committee met on July 11th Mr. Head, Ms. Erdenberger, Ms. Juarez, and myself in attendance. Continuing to work through the 6,000s, we've gone back a couple policies that have required some changes due to statute that'll be coming as well. One of those is on the agenda tonight as an information item. There we go. Okay, so actually now it is on there as first reading, which is great. So the policies 5420 for dating violence, really just a technical change there, and 8272 Board Code of Ethics were on information item before. Oh, I'm sorry, there it is. Sorry, I missed the I1E, update to policy 5008. That is on for as an information item. So this is our policy regarding attendance, and this was another policy that was changed to conform to statute. All of our intervention kind of schedule and practices really will stay the same as far as what points and what interventions we put in place in regard to attendance. Really the only change that the statute necessitated is at the 20-day mark, or I'm sorry, when there are 20 days of missed school, regardless of the reason, whether it's excused or unexcused, there will be an assessment at that time of barriers as required by statute. Otherwise, the policy is largely the same. It just implements that new requirement. So those are the information items, and if I will wait, or do I get to go into the next one too? Is that all right if I move into action items? All right, so I2A, approval of first reading, so 5420 and 8272, we mentioned those. Both of those were on as information items. Again, happy to take any additional questions now. Likewise, we're on second reading for policies 2120, 4040, 4045, 8130, and 8231. Those are line of authority. Our new social media policy, 4040, expense and reimbursement for employees, annual organizational meeting, and the expense reimbursement for board members. Those have been on previous agendas, but again, happy to take questions on those. I guess one other note that I should have made with regard to policy 5008, that is a policy that we will be asking to waive first reading and put it into policy at our next, because of the statutory change and the timelines there, we'll be asking to put that on the agenda and waive first reading at our next board meeting. Any questions? I guess let me go ahead and ask for questions on 5008, the information item first. That's the attendance policy.
Did you say that one will be next board meeting if we waive it? Okay.
Right. Correct. So then on I2A, I guess let's do those separately. I'll make a motion to for approval of first reading of 5420 and 8272 on behalf of the committee.
All right, we have a motion. Since it's a committee motion, it doesn't require a second. Do we have any comment on the approval of first reading for policies 5420 or 8272? All right, seeing none, Dr. McFarland, please call the roll.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Erdenberger.
Aye.
Head.
Aye.
Juarez.
Aye.
Kratky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Thielen.
Aye.
7 aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Thielen for a motion.
So I'll also make a motion for approval on second reading of policies 2120, 4040, 4045, 8130, and 8231 on behalf of the committee.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Thielen on behalf of the policy committee to approve first reading on 2120, 4040, 4045, 8130, and 8231. Any discussion, colleagues? All right, seeing none, Dr. McFarland, please call the roll.
Head.
Aye.
Juarez.
Aye.
Kratky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Thielen.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Erdenberger.
Aye.
7 aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And just correcting the record, I think I said that was a motion to approve first reading. That was second reading for those policies.
Yeah, we're going to do that at the next meeting. Yep.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Item I2C, the report of student fees and waivers for the 23-24 school year and recommendation to waive all student activity fees for extracurricular activities for 24-25. Mr. Ryan?
Education, Superintendent Ray, let that interim slip in one last time. I'm going to vamp here for just a moment while Dr. McFarland gets the presentation set up for me. I think I'll start out with some initial comments that the waiver that was approved for student activity fees this time last year for the 23-24 school year was a resounding success. Virtually all middle and high schools got more money from the student activity fee, either $15 at the middle school level or $45 at the high school level than they received the previous year. The additional funding was especially well received at the middle school level. We identified early on in the review of that recommendation that the middle schools were having some significant difficulties funding their extracurricular activities adequately. And so the additional $15,000 base funding plus $15 per student plus an escalator for poverty in the school buildings provided some additional resources that were sorely needed at the elementary school level. Additionally, the funding that was received at the high school levels was able to be provided sooner because of the waiver. We didn't have to wait for receipt of fees to come in. So we were able to make a distribution the first week of the new budget year for 75% of the estimated fees. So school buildings were able to hit the ground running. We trued up to their actual enrollment in the student census in October, and we're able to make the final distribution later in the calendar year. And so they received all of their funding essentially before second semester started, and we are already in process of working on the initial distribution for the upcoming school year sometime next month in August, hopefully having that out to them before they even welcome students into the building. So having that waiver has been a huge success. So state statute requires that we provide this report to the board annually and the amount of activity. It includes fees charged and any waivers provided students. The student fees themselves are defined in policy 5416 and included in the student handbook. Because we weren't certain how this was going to work and the uncertainty of some of the school finance reform that's being proposed, we are continuing to recommend a waiver versus actually changing board policy regarding the student activity fee, but that is something that we will potentially revisit prior to this time next year. The activity being presented is for a 12-month period beginning June 1st through May 31st. Essentially the academic year, so that way it's a timely fashion before the beginning of the school year. The fee categories are in 4 broad areas. Number 1 is athletics, which includes the waived student activity fee, it's labeled athletic fee in the PowerPoint presentation. The second big category is device protection for the iPads provided to students. Those students who don't qualify for educational benefits are able to purchase protection for their iPad for loss or damages for $25. We also have the third category, which is reimbursement for lost or damaged district property. That would be either to uninsured iPads, other devices, miscellaneous equipment in the school building, or for lost or damaged textbooks. And then the generic catch-all category for all others. Generally, those are fees associated with student groups or specific activities that don't fall directly under the student activity fee as outlined in board policy. At the elementary school levels, the net fees collected were $158,000. The majority of that was for device protection fees. At the middle schools, $132,000 was collected. A pretty even split between device protection and reimbursement for lost or damaged property. High schools is where the lion's share of the activity happens in the student activity funds, $761,000. $103,000 of that was for athletic fees, in addition to the district-provided student activity fee. $88,000 for device protection. The most significant portion in this area, $474,000, was for the reimbursement for lost or damaged property. And then all other activities, again, you'll note that the student groups are much more active at the high school level than the middle school level, totaling almost $100,000. Grand total of almost $1.1 million in net fees charged for students, in addition to the $45 or $15 activity fee that was provided by the district. Student fees by source, just a couple infographics there. Almost 70% of the activity happens at the high school level. Again, there are much more extensive activities at that level. Reimbursement for lost or damaged property, just over half of the total student fees out of the 4 categories. It's unfortunate that's the case, but that is where we are assessing those post the waiver of the normal student activity fees. I won't go through any of these next slides in any great detail, but just for your informational purpose, we have a breakdown by each individual building and program, which of the 4 buckets, any waivers that were provided, for fees charged, and what the net fees were for the years. Again, $158,000 in total at the elementary school, $133,000 at the middle schools with some modest waiving of fees that were previously assessed, and just over $750,000 at the high school level, again with some waiving at programs for some of those fees. Next, we have a recap of the school activity fund beginning balances, total receipts for the time period, and expenditures, and their ending balance as of May 31st, 2024. I think the biggest thing I would highlight here is that you generally see most of the high schools, because of the additional funding during the year, actually have a larger balance remaining at the end of the year to begin the new school year and hit the ground running with their activities. I know fall sports camps in the past have been an issue having sufficient funds to adequately put those on, and all of the schools are at a great point in time this year to do that moving forward, and should receive that first distribution of student activity funds again before the end of August. So with all that being said, we would recommend that the board continue to waive the student activity fee as they did last year. The general formula, as I indicated earlier, is a $45,000 base for high schools, plus $45 per student, plus a multiplier based on the free and reduced lunch levels in their buildings. Middle schools receive a $15,000 base plus $15 per student plus the same multiplier. The multiplier was something when we were reviewing the proposal to waive activity fees that we felt was an equity issue. We see some of our schools have a great disparity in the amount of gate receipts and booster funding that they're able to receive from their community. And so that is why we developed a multiplier to help provide some additional funding for those schools that may not have as much gate receipts or booster club activity available to them. And again, 75% of the funds are distributed to the school at the beginning of the year. In the past, we've made that first distribution after collecting fees, typically around Thanksgiving time. So the school buildings had to really rely on those gate receipts from the fall sports to cash flow their student activities. And this helps them tremendously to have the resources available they need early on in the school year. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Before we open it up to questions, I'll take a motion to waive the student activity fees outlined by Board Policy 5416, Section A, for all students for the 24-25 school year. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Smith. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Cassidy. Just barely beat you to it. All right, now we will open it up for questions, colleagues. Ms. Cassidy?
I don't have a question so much as I just want to, I don't know whose idea this was, but whoever's idea, I mean, it's just logical. I'm sure the schools are so appreciative of getting these funds early. So it's a win-win, like you said. There's really nothing negative in here, so thank you, whoever came up with it. We'll say it was you. We're going to say it was you.
Definitely was a collaborative effort with Dr. Krogstrand in athletics.
Yep.
And receiving feedback from our principals and our school treasurers about some of the difficulties.
Well, all of you together, thank you much. I think it seems like a game changer, and it just seems very logical and a easy change that we could make to help our schools. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Good work.
Thank you. Any further questions, colleagues, comments? I have potentially two for you real quick. So A, thank you for this step. I know last year was definitely welcomed from at least the schools, the principals I've spoken with. The $15 at the middle school level and $45 at the high school level, do we feel like that's enough money to, kind of offset the cost of running all these sports and athletic programs, or should we look at potentially increasing that?
So when we proposed this formula that was approved last year and that we recommend continuing, we did evaluate those dollar amounts, $45 or $15. Ultimately, we added the base amount, $45,000 at the high schools and $15,000 at the elementary school, as a recognition that perhaps inflation had impacted those costs, but without changing the fee amount in board policy. We also recommended the poverty multiplier again to help offset some of those additional costs at our buildings that don't have as many resources as others. Certainly if there are other areas that we feel aren't being met, i.e. students participating in multiple events, that's causing a drain on some of the programs, that's something that we can definitely look into in the future. But based on our review a year ago, we felt this formula was appropriate, and certainly the end-of-year balances that we see in the student activity accounts seems to indicate that it's on target for that.
Perfect, thank you. And you anticipated my second question regarding multi-sport students or multi-activity students, are also looking at potentially adding a multiplier in for schools like, say, Westview, for example, which has this past year only 3 classes, so lower attendance, lower poverty rate, yet they had 4 basketball teams versus some high schools that had 1, and so the increased cost of providing transportation, uniforms, everything to those students. So maybe different ways that we could capture athletic participation within the formula as well. So thank you for looking at that, and thank you for your work on this. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, colleagues? Yeah, Ms. Warris.
So I appreciated that you had that multiplier factor in there for the schools that needed it. That's those finance skills coming through. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, one last call. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, Dr. McFarland, please call the roll.
Thielen.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Erdenberger.
Aye.
Head.
Aye.
Juarez.
Aye.
Kratky.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
7 ayes.
carries. Thank you. Moving on, we have two receipt reports this evening. Item J1, the Head Start Monthly Board Report for May 2024, and item J2, the third quarter board conference expenses, May 2023 through 2024. Moving to closed session, Mr. Smith for a motion.
I move that the Board of Education go into closed session for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the interim superintendent, secretary to the board, Shane Ryan, and legal counsel pending litigation and legal advice.
We have a motion by Mr. Smith. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by, who was that? I apologize. Ms. Erdenberger, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Cassidy,
Aye.
Erdenberger,
Aye.
Head,
Aye.
Juarez,
Aye.
Cracky, Smith,
Aye.
Thielen,
Aye.
7 aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Let me remind the board that the purpose for closed session is for protection of the public interest and the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary of the board, Shane Ryan, and legal counsel pending litigation and legal advice. Let the record reflect the board went into closed session at 8:31 p.m. Let the record reflect the board came out of closed session at 8:57 PM. Let the record reflect the board meeting adjourned at 8:57 PM.